Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here on Sunday.
Hey, everybody. Are we talking loud enough? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh,
Right on. Well, Kevin, it's an honor to be here. And as I was telling him backstage, we've been pals going back a full century. And when I found out he wrote a book, I found out like a lot of the world found out. I found out it through social media.
yeah. I'm sorry about
And
that.
yeah, thanks for sharing. And he rang me and he said, "Hey, would you host this LA event with me?" I'm like, "Of course." Kevin wrote a book, and then he like sent me the thing, and I read it, and I was like, "Oh, is this sort of a self-help book?" And I just got a little nervous because, as shocking as it might seem, people don't really look at this to discuss improvement, self-improvement. And I was like, okay, well, let me read this book. Has anybody had the chance to read this yet?
Started it.
It's remarkable. It is remarkable. And there's nothing worse than someone you know taking on a project and you're like, oh, that's and there's nothing better than falling in love with something someone's done. And I got to read this over the last week, and we'll get into how and why and all that, but he wrote one of the most relatable books that I've read in a long time that I just think everyone's going to really enjoy. And let's sort of get
Thank you. Grammy nominated book author. So.
But well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Why a book? Why now? What prompted you to write?
So about 7 years ago, they say that nothing good ever happens in a bar after 2 a.m., especially in New Orleans during Mardi Gras. But this one exception is I ran into a buddy. He was a guy named Brady Wood from Dallas, Texas, and he was in New Orleans with a group of his an entrepreneurs group, and they had hired Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point and Outliers, to do a speech for them. And I was like, that sounds really cool. He goes, yeah, you should do a speech for us. And like everything that's posed to me, I'm always like, yes. I figure it out later. I'm always like, I live in the world of yes, always time. And for better or for worse. And so a few minutes later, it was 2 weeks away, and I had to think of something to speak about. And so, and these were all entrepreneurs, men and women who were very successful. And I was like, my normal thing where I just make it up and riff would be exposed as BS very quickly. So I was like, I gotta talk about something. So I started thinking about my career and my personal life and the ups and downs and how I was able to, or I had to pivot and evolve. And I realized there were like, oh, there's actual real things that I do in my life and I've learned and I've read about. I'll talk about that. And so I did that first speech in a bar in Dallas at the place called the Rhythm Room. And it did well, and I got some different speaking gigs after that, and I play guitar too, like I'm gonna do today, and it kind of took off. And then right before the pandemic, I'm an English major. I went to LSU, go Tigers, SEC. I have to go to the Tiger show. Nobody, no one cares. You can't curse here.
I know.
And there's a dog, so. But I was like, I'd written a book in early 2000s, and it was being edited. And then The Hangover came out, and it was a much better version of the book I'd written. Damn it. So that languished for a while. Right before the pandemic, I was like, and I was talking to the person who helps me do these speaking gigs, and they were like, you need a book. That you'll get more speaking gigs, and I was like, you don't have to convince me. I want to write a book. That's what I've always done, and I've always dreamed. Like most of us, we all have a book inside of us, and it just never. Most of us, it never happens. And so I started writing, and I had this aha moment, taking a run from my house, and I called my wife up, and I was like, I know what I'm going to do. And it was the idea of a business parable, a story, because I wanted to talk about these things that I've done in my life and my career. But I didn't want it to be a how-to manual, really prosaic and boring. And I'd read at different times these business parables like Who Moved My Cheese and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I love narratives. I love my favorite songs tell stories like Dylan, Tangled Up in Blue. you know, and some of my favorite Ezra songs are songs like Lifetime, Closer Than Tell a Narrative. I was like, and that was the epiphany, the unlock how I'm gonna write this moment. It was like, I'll tell a story. And so I came up with Jake Stark, because there's a musician I love named Joe Stark. and like most people you write, you use your friends' names for the different characters, and then you forget to change it. And that's how it started. And but you know, I'm not going to get up and say that every day I would write for 2 weeks, and I'd be like, I'm going to write 250 words. And I used a program called Scrivener, if there's anybody authors out there, because it gives you it stays hidden. It's a pop-up menu, and it tells you how many words you've written that day. And I was like, I'm going to do 250 words. And some days I'd struggle to write 250 words. Other days I'd look, it'd be 3,000. You know, so, and then I'd go 3 months without doing it. So, but finally, thank you to worldwide pandemic, one of the few good things that came out of this book. I finished the book.
Well, there's an interesting thing, because being a songwriter doesn't necessarily automatically say, now you can write a book.
Yeah.
So you're used to writing in let's say a 3-minute window. You have to tell a story pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Did you? And that's what really got me, is that you were able to really craft this novel out of this character. And I have 2 questions for you. One is, to answer first, is did you approach it the same way you approach songwriting, or did you channel a different part of your brain? Because you aren't writing a 3-minute song that resolves quickly. You aren't writing a repeated chorus. You're not. You're actually writing a narrative.
I knew I wanted to tell a story, and just like when you start off as a musician, you play cover songs, and you play them over and over and over again, and slowly through osmosis, you learn the structure of a song. You don't know it when you're doing it, but you've done it so many times, it just happens. And I've just read books so much all my life. When I wrote that book that never came out, I based it on a book by a guy named Graham Greene called Last Orders. It was a Booker Prize winner. And I've loved taking, I'll structure my book like that. And there's a book called The Go-Giver that I love, that's a business parable that's done very well. And I love the way it was written. I was like, I can structure my book like that. So I use that as kind of a template for my book.
The other thing that hit me was this character of Jake Stark. Again, when you're reading it, it wasn't George Glass.
Right.
This guy had a
Wait,
personality.
who's George Glass?
Yeah, you know who George Glass is.
That's a famous literary reference. You just went over my head.
Did everyone see the Brady Bunch?
Huh?
Yeah. When Jan is asked to name her boyfriend very quickly, and she's like, it's George. And then she looks over at glass, and the character
Really?
is really?
I've seen every Brady Bunch.
Clearly you haven't.
I've seen the Davy Jones.
Thank you for the 3 people that got that reference. But my question is he's such a fully fleshed out character, and that's one of the things that really surprised me about the book, that I got involved with this character, and I was really interested in this character. Did you enter the book having the character fully fleshed out? Did you just have an idea who he was, and did he evolve as a character as you went on?
Yeah.
How did he come to be? You knew you named him after a friend of yours.
I named him.
The fact he didn't come one-dimensional was really impressive.
Well, thank you, Tom DeSavia, Grammy-nominated author. You can tell I'm a little burned up about that. When I write a song, the narrative, the story just happens, and as I just write it, it just starts to happen. And when I've written stories, it just every day, I don't know where it's going to go. It just starts happening. But it's no coincidence that Jake's 45, but he had a big success as an artist in the 90s. Then he got dropped. Then he started writing songs for other people. There's some me in there, But Jake never met. Jake was. I was never dropped. Was dropped by plenty of labels, but not my publisher. And I never met a 28-year-old genius named Sir Daniel Smith Daniels. But I knew that it had to have heart. I knew it needed to draw you in. But going again, when I read all these business parables, I was, being an English major, and I'll read like highbrow books, and then I'll read like trash. I'm a huge Nicholas Sparks novels that make me cry. Or but when I looked at these business parables, I was like, oh, these are super successful books. Like Who Moved My Cheese has sold 14.1 million copies, and the writing is terrible. It's 41 pages start to finish. And honestly, I was like, I can do that. The bar is so low. But then as I started writing it, I wanted it to have heart. And then you start thinking, this is going to have my name on it. This is going to be a document that I need to be proud of. And so the character told me what it needed as it went on. And then I'd finished the first draft, and it said, like the book that I was, it's different books I was inspired by, it said nothing about their personal life. And I was like, I need to go back, and he needs to have a family. The original Jake Stark was a bachelor, and I was like, no, he needs to have, he needs to be able to apply these things he's learning in his life and business to his family, because that's what happened to me. I realized, oh, when I do these different things and conduct myself better in business and in songwriting, and I collaborate and I listen, and I leave my comfort zone, and all these things that are these 5 practices, when I started applying that to my own life got better, my family life. And so I needed Jake to have that, so I gave Jake a wife and a kid, and so it was really, he didtated. Right. Great Jake Stark.
Well, it's funny you said that too, because when I first got the book, I didn't read anything about it. I didn't want to be tainted by anyone's opinions of it.
Can you guys hear?
Can you all hear me
okay? Okay.
And so I dove in without knowing anything about the book, and it's the greatest song, and so I assumed it was a book for musicians.
Right.
It's going to be, okay, so you want to be a musician, you want to have success in this business. And it wound up being something that will truly, and I mean this, I hope the sincerity is coming across, it really is just this wide appeal book, but in that it does have a songwriter and a creative force as its main character. One of the things that's, and both of us having been in entertainment for most of our lives, it's intuitive to reject business.
Yeah.
It's just you're taught, like, I'm doing art to reject business. I don't, and I was saying to you earlier, I think I spent much of my life not reading a lot of these books, never read them, and I was like, okay, I'm not listening to the man. I don't need business practices. I'm in the music business.
Right.
And it's, like I said, it's really unusual how, for a musician to do it. And at what point in your personal career did that strike you? Was it reading these books? Is that what? And you applied them, and it makes sense in here. And I'm not like, sorry to cut off your answer. It's not like, have you heard the good news, brother? You're gonna be saved after you read this book. It's just a great example of how these can apply.
The irony about the music business is what Tom said, is that so many musicians, you come up like you're giving your finger, I'm not gonna do traditional career, I'm gonna pursue my muse and do music, and I'm not gonna have any commercial considerations because that's placating to convention and what I'm expected to do. Now, in songwriting, there's maybe some truth to that, but the irony is that the thing that trips up most musicians in their life, in their career, and ultimately they leave the business is because they knew nothing about the business part of the music, and it's the music business. They did a terrible publishing deal, they did a terrible label deal, they got in bed with the wrong manager, and then they get cynical, and cynicism in the music, in life, cynicism, being jaded, losing that wonder and that optimism is the kiss of death, period, in anything you do. And so I kind of learned, I don't know why, but I was like, I got to learn about my business. From the early stage, I read the Donald Passman book, The Business of Music. Then there was a more business-centric book too, but I read Hitmen, Frederick Dannon's book, all these books. So what I realized is that early on is that the music business, those aren't mutually exclusive ideas. They can coexist, and that if you neglect the business part, what you're doing, that hamstrings your music career, and vice versa. If you're not making great music, it doesn't matter how astute you are in business. So I kind of had that, and maybe it was because nothing easy ever happened for me and Better Than Ezra. You know, we were together 7 years. We got together in 1988. We were rejected by every label. Good. This will always be the biggest song of Better Than Ezra. Maybe. We have a new single coming out this summer.
Woo!
It'll always be good. I mean, but still good. You know, the Wah song, which I love. But it was rejected by. We did right over here at the rehearsal room at Selma. It was where Guns N' Roses used to rehearse. We were rejected at so many different showcases. You know, then in '95, those same A&R guys who said no to us were telling their artists, "You need a song like Good," which is a true story. The band The Imposters, Morty Coyle, and all those guys. So I just realized at an early age that it was perseverance, and I was older when we had success, so I was able to read books, and so when we did have success, I was ready, and there was plenty of mistakes in my career, but I was able to avoid a lot.
You talk in the book, one thing that hit me too is this character Jake, and you go through this time with him. He really is struck. The character is struck by both confidence in people and vulnerability in people. Do you think it's important to have a balance of both?
It's with the Jake sees in people, or
like he expresses confidence that he's really impressed by confidence in people, and then other times he's really impressed with vulnerability in people.
Yes.
And I think that is sort of you.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
a mix, and I thought it was really interesting. Do you think that's important? Is that something you've learned over time to balance those two things?
I just think that's truth. You know, and then in the book, through these rights with these 5 different writers of this boutique publishing company, Jake is exposed to these 5 steps of the method, and this was created by Sir Daniel Smith Daniels, who Jake meets in the first week, and he applied it. You'll learn this in the book. He got knighted because he came with this thing called the method that came out of a supply chain algorithm that solved problems in impoverished nations. And so, but his real love was writing songs, and so he brings it to much success to Nashville. But these 5 steps were just things that from just reading, you know, whether it was about great producers like Max Martin, Pharrell, even Ryan Tedder, and then, you know, Jack Welch, Warren Buffett. What I started realizing that is whether the practices, the things that people do creative,ly and in business and in life, and self-help books too, there's all these parallels. There's just truth. Whatever milieu, I'm probably mispronouncing the word, you're in, and that's what I really love. Like, there's just certain things, just ways to conduct yourself, things to do, and so that really, like you said, just that people are, there's a duality. People are confident, and the most confident person you know is also the most insecure person. And we all have both of that in us, and I just love exploring that, and maybe Jake illustrates that.
Well, and it is a big part to generalize everything is just changing your attitude and perception,
Yeah.
which is kind of the hardest thing to do. I mean, negativity is way more powerful than positivity.
Yeah.
Meaning it's a lot easier to break you down than to build you up. But the things that you touched on that I thought were great were like doing the opposite of what you normally do.
Contrary action.
As
Daniel Smith, if you guys got to listen to the audiobook, I do all the voices. Daniels, use contrary action, Jake. Contrary action is something that a very close friend of mine, a guy named Steve Lee, tells me all the time. Do the opposite of what we're all creatures of habit, and so many of those habits are not great. You know, I don't feel like doing that. Then you like get your ass up, go to the gym. You know, contrary action is really powerful. So I really, you know, bringing those things into the book.
Right. Well, and there was ones like, you know, embracing other people's success, which is exactly what we're not taught, especially in a post-American Idol world.
Yeah.
We're taught one person wins.
Yes.
And it's amazing when you actually let go, and it's about collaboration, it's about opening up to other people's success, it's about controlling your ego. All these things that are really simple but go against what you're being told constantly and what we do in normal practice.
One of the things, the second practice is something I call filling the well, and it's the idea that inspiration that feeds creativity resides in this finite well, and when we're being creative, we're drawing on that. And so many times you keep drawing and drawing, and then you get to creative bankruptcy, to where you're like, there's nothing left. And it's no coincidence that a lot of great albums are that first album, because when you're young, inspiration is coming at you at 100 miles an hour. You're, high school, middle school, college, your first love, your first heartbreak, your relationship with your peers, your siblings, your parents, that music you love. But then as you get going, it can't be a passive thing. You gotta keep filling the well. And so in the book, I talk about steps on it can't be through osmosis here. It's gotta be with intent. You gotta go out. And one of the things I talk about, there's a theme through the book, it's checking your ego. Because ego gets in your way all the time. I'm better than that, I'm better than them, God, they're having success, but they suck, But when you remove that, and as one of the characters in the book, a guy named Shane Sawyer, and he's a Sam Elliott of Nashville, and he says to Jake, as they're up in a Cessna 150 about to do a barrel roll, he says, "My ego is not my amigo." And that's a phrase I love. And in the filling the well, one of the things is embracing the success of your competition. When you're able to check your ego and say, God, what they're doing is awesome. For me as a songwriter, I'm like, when I heard Train come out with Drops of Jupiter, and we were putting out At the Stars at the same time, it crushed me that song I knew it was going to be a huge hit, and ours was. And I'm like, oh. And I did immediately go, that's awesome. I was like, no, that sucks. Ours is better. And now I realize. When I'm able to just let go of that ego and go, it's amazing. Why is it amazing? Oh, it's because they did this and this and this. I can learn from that. And then the example, like, I have a friend a guy named Robert LeBlanc. He is from Houma, Louisiana, and he talks like this. He's a Cajun, and he has a bunch of restaurants in New Orleans, and one is a James Beard Award-winning restaurant. And when Robert, his T is silent, when he's not in his restaurants, he's sweating it out in the kitchen or greeting people at the front door. He's at his competitor's restaurant. He's at Emerald's restaurant. He's at John Besh's restaurant, and he's learning. And the best people know what the competition is doing, because I always say, like, how can you compete if you don't know what you're competing against? So that is embracing competition.
And there's another point that I think we need to bring up that I relate to this too, which is dare to be stupid.
Dare to be stupid.
Yeah. That I can do.
Well, dare to be stupid is the fifth. Without revealing, there's the spoiler. We haven't done a spoiler. It's gonna blow your mind. Dare to be stupid is the fifth thing that Jake discovers, and Sir Daniel illustrates it to him in this big home gym he has on this peak in Leaper's Fork. And at the end of this huge gymnasium that's been acoustically designed, there's this massive equation. It's a supply chain algorithm that's how Sir Daniel gets his knighthood, because he came up with this. And he illustrates to Jake that he just decided to think of the most outlandish solution to a problem and then reverse engineered it. And he's there's a famous educator named Sir Kenneth Robinson. He was a real knight. He passed away recently, and he has one of the highest watched TED Talks ever. He's a great educator, and he came up with the idea, or said, that you'll never come up with anything truly groundbreaking unless you're prepared to fail. And that when you're in a song collaboration, or you're in a collaboration with your peers at work, you've got to create an atmosphere where failure is not stigmatized, and big ideas, stupid ideas are embraced. And when you create that environment, and you don't have that filter, like that, when you second guess yourself, like, I don't know if you've ever been at work and you're like, you have this idea, and sometimes you don't say it at all, or you preface it with, this sounds stupid, but what about this? You know, when you don't do that and you just throw it out there, that's when you get that hit song or next tech idea. So dare to be stupid, or I say dare to suck. Put yourself out there, come up with just great ideas, just throw them out there, because the biggest songwriters, a guy named J.T. Harding, who's a big Grammy Award winning, there's that word, Grammy Award. He has no filter. He throws out the worst lyric. He's a lyricist. He has just the worst ideas, and then you just go on and you're just about to tune him out. Then he says something like, I'll never forget, because she was a heavy metal pedal steel player. And it's in this song, there was a huge Florida Georgia line, heavy metal pedal steel player. Pedal steel is a kind of slide thing. And that's why he has massive success, because he dares to be stupid.
And he does.
And he does.
And he does, quite well. I want to give time for everyone to ask questions, and we could get to the rock.
The
So
rock.
I want to, we could go on for another, we get an hour of this backstage. What's the best advice you've ever received in your life, and what's the advice you give to people?
The best advice at the beginning of my career, it's a quote. It's a Pete Seeger quote. It's education is what you get when you read the fine print. Experience is what you get when you don't. Which I love. Isn't that Pete Seeger?
A little too long for a t-shirt.
I know, right?
And what advice would you give
My
someone?
advice is for you is don't quit. That there's always going to be someone who's more talented than you, that's smarter, that's faster. I don't care what it ever is you do. There's someone who's better. So what separates it? It's don't quit. The people at the end of the day, I'm a shining example. I'm not the most talented. I'm not the smartest. I just never quit. Better Than Ezra was 7 years before we got signed. Then I got dropped, and then songs don't get cut that you just think are. I just don't stop. So don't quit. So live in the world. It's a world of no's. It's all you need is one yes. So live in yes, and when you have an idea, say yes, and then figure it out. Don't put up barriers to your success.
Well, it's been knowing you for all these years, and I know you all know this because you're all, I'm guessing, here for him. But seeing you go from rock band guy to hit songwriter guy to music festival entrepreneur guy to now author guy.
Yes.
And it's and done all of them well, and just the pivoting that you've done. You haven't. There's people that you see just that pivot just to stay alive.
A little of that.
I always say, when everyone asks me, like, how have you survived for 30 some odd years in business? I'm like, fear. Fear is the biggest motivator. I'm terrified.
We all have that.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Middle of the night.
But you've stayed with stuff that you've known, or at least suspected you would do well, and that you could sort of.
Thank you. I tell people I did get really lucky being a songwriter, because I learned when it was the moment when Good was a hit, and we were doing the video in the French Quarter, New Orleans, and I was sitting there. I was in my car, and I was about to go in, and the big remote generator was out there, and there was cables going into this big old mansion right in the French Quarter, and there were makeup artists, and there was star coaches, and I saw my band coming out, and they were all, Tom loves makeup. I'm like, you're so pretty. Bela Lugosi, get some color. And I was, and it was a moment I was like, whoa, that silly song that started off in my apartment, 4 chords, became a song we played, became a recording, became a release, became a hit. Now it's this video, and it's part of people's lives. They have memories to it. It's much bigger. And I was able to see that this silly idea I had can become my career and change people's lives, part of their lives. So that was why I kept with the book. I was like, finish it, because I know that what it can turn into. Pilgrimage Festival. I know this silly idea. Just don't stop. Just be smart. Align yourself. Know when you need a skill set, to bring in, and that has just been my battery.
Well, you just said something else that I put together just sitting here with you. A lot of it seems to come out of jogging with you, and I realize that I don't exercise. And I think that's the reason I'm failing with that.
I am not a crazy, I'll just do it when jogging clears my head. Before I do a song write, if it's not, the synapses aren't going when I go exercise, even for 20 minutes, suddenly I'll come up with ideas.
Pilgrimage Festival.
Pilgrimage Festival was a jog.
That's why, like this book, jog. Yeah.
Coming, saying the greatest song. That's it. It was a run. Yeah, it always. I don't think. Yeah. Jogging.
Plastics.
Laura's my buddy, so you're really dating yourself. No one says jog anymore, Kevin. Just say you went for a run. I'm like, that was great. Bram Wood. He was older than me.
Exercise.
I was jazzing.
Let's open up to any questions. Anybody have anything to ask you, Kevin? Come on. There you go.
Hi. What are your favorite songs to perform?
Favorite songs to perform? Ezra songs or just period?
I think just Ezra songs.
Ezra songs. I love Lifetime. That's a great one. Just because I love the story of it, and somebody was asking me the other day, like, do you not like playing the hits? Are you tired of them? I'm like, no, because those songs have been very good to me. I'm very grateful for them. But also, when you're doing a set list, you're like, you string your set list. There's peaks and valleys in a set list, but you string it by placing your hits, the songs people know, strategically throughout the set. So when I see the hit coming up, I'm like, good, I don't have to over-emote because I'm playing a new song. I feel it, so hits are, so I like playing the hit songs. I love I Just Knew, because it's a waltz, and our drummer, Michael Jerome, is so good, and I just get to lay back. There's a newer song I love, Grateful. I love playing that song because I love singing that song. And I put the guitar down halfway through by design, later in my career, I've loved putting the guitar down and acting like a fool. So, sorry, it's coming. More of it.
You've lived in a lot of cool places like LA, Tennessee, New Orleans. What other places, or what place did you find the most inspirational for songwriting for you?
Wow. I have loved every place I've lived. New Orleans was amazing. There's a reason New Orleans has attracted painters, Degas, writers, musicians, architects, because it just breathes and oozes, and it's all these things conspire. The heat, the humidity, the lack of any bedrock under the earth. The ground is literally moving, and it's just this organism. It inspires songs. And I moved to New Orleans, and there's King of New Orleans and WWOZ. And then LA, Coyote was written about riding my bicycle up Beechwood Drive, and I saw a coyote. I started going, coyote.
Michael Jerome says hi, by the way.
What?
Michael Jerome says hi.
Michael Jerome's best.
I told him I was
here. And then Nashville too. It's a tendency is to say, the place I left sucks. Like so many people who move to Nashville just love to trash LA because so many people. But I loved it. I loved living in LA. But I find every place, to be inspirational. I'm trying to think of, it might be easier to say what wasn't. I didn't write a lot of songs when I lived in San Antonio. After Katrina. So bad to San Antonio.
Thank you.
Well, I thought coyote was a metaphor this whole time.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a real coyote. It was a road trip in my 4-cylinder Jimmy my GMC Jimmy, after I left Baton Rouge and moved with everything. Do you remember that time in your life when you could put everything you owned in your car in Glad trash bags to where you just push, you close the door enough and then just all the windows, it was just plastic. It was a great time. In 3 hours, I could be gone. Everything on bed on top, and that was that drive.
A really fantastic writing teacher of mine once said something that's really stuck with me, which is all books have a certain amount of luck. In other words, that you can put in the time and the grit, but you know, there's some aspect of it just sort of working out. And I wonder like what the intersection is between luck and like maybe not feeling like you're having that luck, and then that perseverance you're talking about, like the not stopping, the keep going.
There's some great quote. What is it? Like hard work and perseverance. The intersection is luck, or something like. I can't remember.
Meets opportunity.
What is it?
Preparation meets opportunity.
Yes, luck. L, love. U, understanding. C, caring. K, kindness. Luck. Okay, I just made that up. You know, perseverance and hard work, yes, but man, there is. But then you also have to realize, you know, this is about not getting cynical. Sometimes it's just freaking luck. And all the time, there's bands that are more successful than Better Than Ezra ever will be, and they play bigger places, and I got it. And their songs aren't better than Ezra, but they're bigger, and a lot of times it's just luck. You know, that program director, you know, just happened to play the song that was good, you know, and didn't play maybe our song or some other band. So there's just luck. You just have to when you can catch it, man, you catch it. But the more you put yourself out there, the more you don't quit, the more chances at bat you get for luck, which is love. No. That's the next book you guys are gonna see. It's gonna be love. Like, that is a bunch of bullshit. I heard it.
I've heard a lot of songwriters over the years talk about how they approach songwriting. Some people write the lyrics first, some people write the melody first, some people wake up in the middle of the night and the song is just buzzing in their head. What's the process for you?
Thank you for that. It's all different. Usually it's strumming the guitar, you know, playing the guitar, just feeling it out. And then I'll just start singing a melody over it. And because that's what draws me, my favorite songs, what's gotta draw me in is a great melody, a great vibe. It just feels good. And that's the way most musicians work. But then it can be a word, collide. Collide was just, that's a money word. And at the time, no one had written a song called, well, maybe they had, but one hadn't been a hit. And then the hard part about that was like, how do I write a song as good as the word? Sometimes it's a dream. Like I'll wake up sometimes, you know, and anybody knows me well. It's like when if I'm looking at you listlessly, like, you know, and you're talking to me, I've got a song in my head, and then I'll just go off of my voice memo. And they're usually terrible, but all different ways. And then one of the things I'll talk about, the third thing is changing your attitude. And it's not like your parents say you got to change your attitude, or a coach used to tell me I got to change my attitude. In the book, it talks about attitude as it relates in aviation. Like altitude is your height off the ground, but attitude is your relationship to the earth. Specifically, when you're landing a plane, what's your angle of approach? What's your attitude when you're trying to land it? When you're trying to complete it? And my attitude is usually starting with the guitar, and but when a lot of times you're hitting a brick wall. I don't know if you've ever been trying to do something that you do every day, and then it is not happening. So sometimes I'll be in a songwriting session, I'm usually by myself, and I'm like, it gets to where I can't even hum a tune, you know. And then I'm like, usually I take a break. Taking a break I'll talk about another thing real quick on the side. It's Brian Eno's, what are the cards that he has?
Tarot?
Oh, I'm forgetting. I'll talk about it in the book. Read the book.
There's no index in this book.
But it's going to come to me in the book. But the idea that when you hit a creative deadlock, change your attitude. So if I'm doing my normal thing, playing guitar, I'll start with the lyric. Or we'll be in a session and it's not happening, like a song like Stuck Like Glue, that was a #1 for Sugarland, my only #1 in country. You know, I was playing guitar for 2 hours, nothing was happening. We had lyrics that nothing happened. Then we changed our attitude. We were like, let's start with a beat. So we created this sound. We started making sounds and looping sounds, and we started tapping on the guitar. And without fail, when you just change your attitude, approach the task a different way, something happens in the process of doing it. Or reverse engineering a hit song, reverse engineering a business idea you love. What are the components that make it great? And then just talking about it, it ungums the gears. They just start moving again. So, changing your attitude. Oblique strategies. So, in the 70s, Brian Eno, who was a great artist, but he produced U2, Coldplay, he came up with this deck of cards. They're called oblique strategies, and they're means of changing your attitude, of breaking creative deadlocks. You pick up a card. One of my favorite, like I said, is take a walk. Just stop, take a walk. And these cards are great. The great Dan Wilson, who wrote Someone Like You for Adele and had massive hits, he came out with just a deck of cards, which is very derivative of oblique strategies, but it's his own thing, called Words in Music. You should check those out. They're probably for sale here.
I got 2 more gentlemen there. Well, 3 more. You, and then we got to the rock.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for the pandemic concerts.
Those were the best. Thank you.
I had a chance to go to New Orleans for my first time last year, and I was walking around and saw WWOZ, and it was like seeing Disneyland for me. I'm a huge fan. And my friends couldn't understand why I'm taking all these pictures of this all of a sudden.
You know.
What does that actually mean to you about that song, and how do you write the song?
WWOZ, thank you very much. Those pandemic shows were so much fun, and I was doing them every week. What was it, Taco Tuesday? A friend said, you gotta name it. The guy who started Stage It, you know that platform called Stage It? Said you gotta name it. Anyhow, that was so much fun. And back to those, I spent a lot of money on a new laptop and a microphone and all this kind of stuff, and I realized at the end, just just my iPhone and just the immediacy and the closeness of it and the rawness of it resonated so much more with people, and it really told me, like, oh, it's just about connection. You know, people want to feel connected to you, and that's why those things worked. WWOZ is the Jazz and Heritage Station of New Orleans. It's the NPR station, and 24/7 they're playing the best music you've ever heard, and it's predominantly New Orleans musicians, and I loved it. You know, speaking of cities that inspire you, New Orleans was doing that for me, and I was working on the Friction Baby record, and I had this. Ezra lived in a band house at the corner of Harmony and Chestnut in the Garden District in New Orleans, and it was an amazing. We got this amazing house. It had just been renovated. They should not have let musicians stay in this house. Destroyed it. And one night, it was a beautiful night. I had my windows open. There was a candle. I had this great mantle and a fireplace, and the ceiling fan was going, like 25-foot ceilings. And I was just strumming my guitar. I was lying on the bed. The windows were open, and I could hear the foghorns of barges coming off the Mississippi River, which were straight down Harmony, maybe 5 blocks till you hit the levee. And that song, if you listen to those lyrics, you know, WWO is on the stereo, a ring of flowers haloed around your head, candlelight ceiling fan, curtains blowing in the wind fall away, barges sound their warnings in the dark. You know, that's all about that moment. Yeah. So that song, again, that's a song that was never a single. It was an album track at the end of the album. What I love about putting music out is that the thing that keeps me hopeful always, despite all the negativity of like streaming and it's all about singles, is that your fans, people will find a nugget, something that speaks, that's real at the end of an album. I mean, Breathless, which was the 12th track on our 2006 record, we never played it live, and Taylor Swift heard it because she was a fan and listened to it, and now we play it all the time. And I've gotten calls from her. This is funny. She performed it live, and then she recorded it. And then in my press, of course, I'm going to say Taylor Swift recorded it. But we got a call from management. Well, we've been seeing that you've been saying Taylor Swift is Breathless, and we don't see it on any of our albums. I'm like, actually, Hope for Haiti album. She performed it live, and I sent them a link, and they're like, oh, okay, thanks. A little behind the curtains drama, but yeah.
So when you write a song, the lyrics part, do like words just come and then the story fits around it? Like first, hey love, like that, it's just like such a heartfelt feeling.
Right.
Like, so did you approach it feeling that and writing the lyrics, or did the lyrics bring the feeling?
That's a great question. Hey Love was written, I had this amazing studio when I lived here in LA. I lived in Silver Lake, but I had a studio on Lookout Mountain that was right next to Joni Mitchell's old house. And it was a bungalow where Warren Hewart, a great producer, lives now, and behind it was a studio that Chad Fisher had built. Chad Fisher was in School of Fish, a band that had a song called 3 Strange Days.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you remember. And I wrote that with a guy named Monty Powell. But Hey Love was like most of my songs. It started with a vibe, and the Hey Love, where you going? I just knew that melody was so good, and I had Hey Love because it's easy. There's certain vowels that are so easy to sing. That's why Hey is, and O's, or because you can hit a higher note with certain vowel sounds. But more times than not, I have a word that gets me at the beginning of a phrase, and then there's an anchor word, and I sing gibberish. Most musicians do this. You sing gibberish and sounds, but the melody to get to that anchor word, and then once you're like, this is a super dope song, the melody, the vibe, and then there's the part in the session everybody hates where you actually got to write the lyrics, and they have to be good. So usually it's the last thing, the lyrics, making them really make sense and stringing those hallmark words together between the melody. But some songs, less times is a fully formed lyric. There's a song off of the solo record, Anyone Ever, was a fully finished lyric. It just fell out, and I was typing on my phone, to capture it. But usually the lyrics come last. Usually the lyric comes last.
Yep. You two, you, and then we'll get to the rock.
Yes. 2 more questions.
So, what would you say has been the primary driver of how prolific you are at any given time as somebody who's very prolific? Is it your youth? Is it where you're living? What is that biggest catalyst?
It's really just that thing I talk about, filling the well. That for me, staying inspired has intent. It's not a passive thing. Like, I realize that to stay prolific, I got to continue being inspired. So I'm always listening to new music, and I'm always listening to music. It doesn't have to be new. I went down the rabbit hole with Barry Manilow on a flight. I was like, because I had just seen Foul Play, that old Chevy Chase, Goldie Hawn, and it has the best opening ever, where she's driving the 68 Beetle on the Pacific Coast Highway, and that's that Barry Manilow song. So I just went down the rabbit hole, listening to new music. Every Friday, New Music Friday. I'm always listening to new music, and without fail, the songwriting sessions that week have some vocal cadence or delivery of some new song I heard, or I'll hear it in my garage when I'm exercising, and I'll run upstairs and put down a beat or something that I never would have. So that keeps me prolific, because if I sit down and I didn't do that, and I played something I would have played an artist in 1995, they'd walk out because it would have no relevancy. So part of that is always, I just find that the more I expose myself to new music and new ideas, the more creative I am. And it just goes through we all have that personal sieve and that litmus test of what's cool or not, and it comes out hopefully a little original. But that's kind of the key.
How have you noticed from 95 till now the music industry changing? Like, what have you liked about it? What haven't you liked about it? Just curious.
That's a
Yeah.
That's a good question. I consider myself super fortunate that I was able to sell records, physical CDs in the last great heyday of the old school record industry, the 90s. Those are still the highest. Those are the highest. I think NSYNC sold the most records the fastest in '98, and then it went downhill when Sean Fanning and Napster came out. So I loved having that. And if you wrote all the songs on a 12-song album, like I was able to do, those were great. It's just a business thing. It was great. And then there were the challenges of file sharing and BitTorrent streaming and all that kind of stuff. And we made it through that into the subscription world. By staying in it, I've always found that there's new opportunities in every new evolution or permutation of the business. It was physical sales and radio, your PROs, BMI, ASCAP. And now it's where it was 6 income streams, now there's 1,000. There's all these aggregators and the streamers and stuff. But technology always, catches up. So I'm, right now the labels are making more money than they ever did because of subscription streaming, and they have a piece of the master use. Like every song that's sold, there's half of it is for the master, the actual physical recording. The other is for the song. It used to be for the songwriters. So there's reason to be optimistic. And there's great music. If you're a young artist, you can make an album on your laptop with Ableton or Logic, and look at Billie Eilish. That's what they did. Look at there's so many young artists. Rex, Orange County. So that's a great time. Back in the day, Better Than Ezra, you got to get out in the road, and you've just lived in obscurity. But now, anywhere you are in the world, you have a song that reacts on TikTok. It's great. So I'm super optimistic about that. Where I'm not optimistic, where it's really sucks right now, is that if you're just a songwriter and you don't have any of the master, you're not a producer, where you have any of that ownership, it's super hard to make any living as a songwriter, because the copyright laws didn't cover digital distribution, because the last one that was written was in 1972. Now there's been 2 years ago, there's the Music Modernization Act to start to address it, but right now songwriters get paid terribly by the streamers. Guess what? Because the streamers were allowed to set the rates they pay songwriters, and most people, if you're a streamer, like, let's pay them 0.000001.
Yeah, it's like nothing.
Because nobody's going to say that we can't do that. So that's what's happened. It's starting to be addressed. So that's a bad part right now. It'll change. I saw it change when everyone said it wasn't going to change for Napster. So you just got to stick around. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Right on. Y'all ready to rock?
Should we play some?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do a Chris Gaines thing better with Jake Stark.
Yeah. I'm going to go out and put on the wig. And